But thank you everyone for joining today. Sheen and I are very excited to show the work we've done with Project Pensive. To give you a little idea of how this demo is going to go, we're going to start with some problem framing, talk a little bit about the design of our filters and recommender engine, actually show it to you demo style, and then time pending, we're going to do a little bit of evaluation and some things we can improve for the next round. Without further ado, Project Pensive is an open source software that leverages the latest research in AI to those offering recommendations. The goal is to build better recommendation engines that incorporate content conscious filters to enhance user experience.
So social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit have grown a lot in the past decade or so. And when used ethically, they can connect users and have many benefits. But they also come with some cons, as recommender engines often promote myopic content that can contribute to misinformation, polarization, and disengagement.
We at the Vector Institute wish to tackle this problem, and our initial efforts around building a tool that leverages NLP to boost or suppress recommendations based on a user's preference. We envision social media platforms where the user is given more control over what they see, and they can apply various filters to enhance their feed. Two such filters in development and presented today are our civility and diversity filters. For our civility filters, it's often unfortunate that social media feeds populate with uncivil and hateful speech. The more unfortunate thing is this often takes away from more meaningful conversations. With advances in NLP and machine learning, it is easier than ever to build models that can analyze text. We've built the civility filter, which empowers an individual user to remove distasteful posts from their feeds. Simply excluding profane comments is not enough. A user may be okay with the occasional swear word, but if a comment contains ideal points, it may not be ideal to remove that from the feed for a given user. A more comprehensive solution involves assigning a toxicity score and allowing the user to set their own tolerance levels.
As for diversity, traditionally, recommendation systems focus on optimizing the accuracy of recommendations presented to users. This leads to a concentration of highly accurate but overly narrow set of results, and traps the user in a so-called filter bubble, where they only see information and opinions that conform and reinforce their own beliefs. This has been found to fuel issues like misinformation and radical beliefs that can lead to real-world violence. So to combat this, our goal is to increase the diversity of content that a user views and engages with. Rather than focusing on short-term satisfaction metrics like click-through rates, our diversity filter will use a diversity metric to help users consciously widen the scope of the information they digest. So with the inclusion of civility and diversity into the conversation of recommendation systems, we want to promote pro-social behavior in online communities and increase long-term user satisfaction.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about the design of our filters, our recommender engine, and how they interact as a system. To start with our civility filter, it was trained on the Civil Comments dataset, which is a public archive of comments gathered from approximately 50 news sites. For each comment in the dataset, a score is assigned between 0 and 1 for the categories that I'm highlighting, the main one being toxicity. If you want to get an idea for the structure, I'm highlighting an example from the dataset. In terms of our model, it's responsible for analyzing text and assigning a toxicity score. We leverage a distilled version of BERT known as DistillBERT. DistillBERT is designed to be smaller, faster, and cheaper. It is pre-trained on the same data as BERT, but using BERT as its teacher in a self-supervised manner. During training of the Civility Classifier, the transformer section of the model is frozen and parameter updates are only applied to subsequent linear layers. During the training of the Civility Classifier, we were leveraging Hugging Face and PyTorch Lightning. Hugging Face is a popular deep learning platform for building, training, and deploying NLP models. And PyTorch Lightning is a research framework that can accelerate your PyTorch code. Among its other benefits, we leveraged it for its multi-GPU training schemes.
In order to implement diversity into recommendations, we first required the embeddings of the items. So firstly, for subreddits, we used a subreddit to vec model, which is based on word to vec, where two words are similar if they are used in similar ways. Specifically, we applied the skipgram model, which goes through each word in the text corpus and tries to predict n words on either side. We applied this word to vec algorithm on Reddit interaction data by treating the subreddits as words and the users that comment on them as context. Then two subreddits are similar if many similar users have the time and interest to comment in them both. Now for comments, they were embedded using the sentence transformers library from Hugging Face, specifically the pre-trained paraphrase mini LM model. And these embeddings were then used in the diversity algorithms to compare items using cosine similarities. So we applied the bounded greedy selection and topic diversification algorithms that I'll describe during the demo.
Now for our recommender engine, you're going to see a lot more of the sarcastic comments Reddit dataset in the next section. But for now, you can know that is a selection of sarcastic and genuine comment replies made by a variety of users and posted in a variety of subreddits. If you're curious of the structure, I'm going to highlight an example from the dataset. In terms of the model, it's responsible for analyzing thousands of comments and ranking them based on a query comprised of a username and subreddit. It's important to note that for this demo, the recommender was not designed to only suggest comments from a given subreddit. The design decision has been made to allow comments from other subreddits as long as they are relevant to either the user or the subreddit. The recommender is comprised of two submodels, respectively responsible for computing representations of queries and comments. The outputs of these models are combined to assign a query candidate affinity score, the idea being a larger affinity score represents a stronger match between query and comment.
Now we'll describe how all of these components interact with each other. So we have three steps laid out here. Firstly, we have the unranked comments, so our data set, and our recommender engine analyzes all of these comments and ranks them. So this results in the first n posts of highest rank, as you can see here. Next, in process 2, when a diversity algorithm is selected and a user selects a comment, these ranked comments are re-ranked by the diversity algorithm in order to enhance diversity. And the set is then compared to the original using a diversity metric, and a percent change is displayed to evaluate performance. Lastly, for all of these diverse comments, they're gone through a civility classifier, which actually assigns them a toxicity score. So if the score of a comment is higher than the tolerance level selected by the user, the comment is dropped from the feed and added to the what was filtered section. And you'll see this more easily displayed during our demo.
Now that we know how these individual tools work, we can sort of put them together and see. So as previously noted in the last section, here's a couple examples from the sarcastic comments Reddit dataset. Disclaimer has to be made. Some of this content is going to be rather uncivil. This is my first time using some of these words in a professional setting, but it's a necessary evil in order to show how the civility filter actually works. So we have the civility filter hooked into this demo, so I can type in a not so civil phrase and actually get a toxicity score. So as you can see, a 0.933 is pretty uncivil. If I type in something that is a little more confrontational, but not necessarily uncivil, you would expect the toxicity score to reflect that. And as you can see, a score of 0.142 is much, much lower. Now I'm just going to select a random comment from the data set and see how our model performs. So this comment is not too uncivil, and as you can see, that is reflected in its score.
Now let's explore how the diversity filter works. So as I mentioned before, there are two algorithms. The first is the bounded greedy algorithm. This algorithm is quite involved, so I'm not going to try to explain it right now, but these are the accompanying equations along with the pseudocode. And this algorithm was taken from the Improving Recommendation Diversity research paper. The other algorithm is a topic diversification algorithm, which is also quite involved. So here's the accompanying equation for that and the pseudocode. This was taken from the Improving Recommendation List through Topic Diversification paper. So before we start, I'd like to point out that these algorithms have never been applied to this data set or any Reddit data set actually, but we found that they actually work quite well. Given this limited data set, we do need to provide some opinionated comments in order to get meaningful results. So I'll first select a algorithm, topic diversification, and then I'll put in something that's a little bit opinionated. So Xbox is much better than PS4. Now this algorithm is going to re-rank all these comments to provide diverse ones. I'm going to highlight specifically the comments that are diverse. So for example, the first one, PS4 owners are stupid and ruining the gaming community. They just know that Xbox is 10 times better. So this comment is a very similar opinion to the target query, but that's okay. If we look at the third comment, after watching their PSX and E3 presentations, I think they'll continue to outsell Xbox for this generation. So this is talking about how PS4 is actually outselling Xbox, so a more diverse opinion. And then if we go to this one, I ended up getting both systems, but if I had to choose only one of them, I'd have no regrets about choosing PS4. So again, a more diverse opinion to the target query. And this is kind of what we want to see. We want to see opinions that are not only different from the target query, but are similar as well. We want to have a more diverse recommendation set with both opinions. And as we can see, this algorithm compared to a normal algorithm has increased diversity by 123%. And I'll explain this, how this is calculated more in the next section. But for now, let's try the next algorithm, which is the bounded greedy selection. And I'll put in another comment. So this data set is taken between 2014 and 2017. So 2016 is when the election happened. So this is why I entered this comment. So very opinionated. So right now, the bounded greedy selection is re-ranking them, and here are results. So I'll go through some of the diverse comments. The first one is, but Hillary is a crook and owned by Wall Street. So similar to the opinion that I put in. But now if we look at the second one, but Clinton misused a semicolon in one of her emails. So she's just as bad. Now this is a sarcasm data set, and this is a very sarcastic email. The person is trying to defend Clinton, but they are using some sarcasm here. If we go to the third one, Hillary wouldn't lie. That would get her indicted for perjury in our justice system. So this is another diverse opinion from the query. It's defending Hillary. And lastly, I bet he's registering dead corpses as Democrats to vote for crooked Hillary, the crook. So very similar in opinion to the inputted text. And that's kind of what we want to see. We want to see different opinions. And so this algorithm is increasing diversity about 200%. So that's pretty good. Now I'll pass it over to Michael for the last section.
Yeah, so now that we've seen the civility and diversity filters work separately, we can actually combine them with our recommender engine. So what we're doing here is we're going to simulate going to Reddit, and we're going to assign as the username Biffington, and we're going to ask for comments related to politics. So right now we're going to do just applying our civility filter. So what's happening right now is our recommender engine is re-ranking comments and then applying its civility filter to compute toxicity scores. So let's take a look at the first example in our feed. Because it doesn't support what he wants it to, that's not that uncivil of a comment, and its score is reflected. If we go to some of the comments that were filtered, they have no comprehension of the hypocrisy or what they have been played as utter fools. It's a little bit more uncivil, and the score reflects that. Because the toxicity score was greater than the threshold that we set as 0.5, it was removed from the feed and the user wouldn't actually see it.
So now let's apply diversity to this too. So I'm going to change the tolerance level to about 0.21. And then I'll also select the bounded greedy diversity algorithm. And then I just need to select a comment for which to get diverse recommendations. So I'll choose this one because I want smaller government and want to pay less for that government. So now when I hit generate feed, what's happening is that the recommender engine is taking all the unranked comments, first ranking them, and then it's going through the bounded greedy selection diversity algorithm. So all those ranked comments are getting re-ranked to enhance diversity. And then once we have those re-ranked comments, they're going through the civility classifier. They're being assigned a toxicity score. And any comments that are above this 0.21 threshold are going to be filtered out of our recommendations. So as we can see, this algorithm increased diversity by 51%. We can see that all of these recommendations are diverse. The toxicity scores for what is recommended is below our threshold. However, this last one, although it's diverse, they're saying it's insane to want less government and less government waste. They're basically disagreeing with the target query. So it's diverse, but it is above the threshold of 0.21 that we gave. So it was filtered out.
So we're a little bit short on time, so we'll try to make it quick with the next couple sections. This section, we are going to evaluate our filters. To start with the civility filter, to evaluate, we're comparing it with the Jigsaw Perspective API. The Jigsaw Perspective tool was built by Conversation AI, who happen to be the maintainers of the civil comments dataset that we're using. After doing some computations and simulations, we could compute precision, recall, and F1. And as you can see by those numbers, we're pretty much on par with Jigsaw's model. Unfortunately, Jigsaw model is not open source, so we can't do a parameter count. However, we do know that they are also using a distilled version of BERT, so they're using the same architecture. I have highlighted a couple examples growing in toxicity from low, medium to high. And as you can see, as the level of toxicity in the comments increases, relatively our score does too.
As for diversity, there is no clear standard or benchmark data set. It's a topic that's very much still in development and being researched. Therefore, we've decided to use a very simple diversity metric that has been agreed upon by many researchers to evaluate our recommendations. As proposed in the Improving Recommendation Diversity research paper, the diversity of a set of items is the average dissimilarity between all pairs of items in the result set. And this is the equation for it. So basically in the previous section, when you were seeing the percent change, we're calculating the diversity of the recommendations generated by the algorithms versus just a normal recommender system. And that's how we were getting that evaluation.
We're going to talk a little bit about some things we can do to build on top of the work that Sheen and I did over the summer. In terms of our civility filter, the best way to improve it is to improve and increase the actual performance of the model. There are a couple things we can do to achieve this. We could implement a more elaborate hyperparameter optimization scheme, and we could also further experiment with model architectures. Currently, we're using Hugging Face to build a Distilbert model, but GPT-2 or GPT-Neo may be other attractive alternatives. Another valuable improvement would be to increase the number of labels output by the model. On top of the toxicity score, the civil comments dataset provides other labels, and I have these highlighted right now. To provide an example of where some of these labels may be useful, imagine a user is content with swear words, but has no patience for identity attacks or sexually explicit content. If these models outputted for these labels, they would have the power to control that.
As for diversity, given the limited time, we could only get the embeddings for the subreddits in comments in a limited way. However, there are many more models for generating embeddings, and I've listed them all here, but I won't go through them right now for the sake of time. And their benefits are listed here as well. Also, given the limited time, we were only able to implement 2 diversity algorithms. However, there are many more, as described in Diversity in Recommender Systems, the research paper. We also just implemented the algorithms that were developed by these other researchers, but given more time, we could have probably explored ways to improve these algorithms and maybe even create a novel technique.
Just briefly to go over how we might be able to improve our recommender engine. It only takes in one query structure, and that is a combination of an author and subreddit, but this could be extended to support combinations of authors, subreddits, comments, and other. And we could also provide the functionality to recommend authors and subreddits on top of our comment recommendations. One other small improvement, currently we are encoding our comments into a lookup table, but if we leverage a library like Hugging Face to build text representations, we might be able to improve the quality of our recommendations. This concludes our demo today. Thank you very much for joining. We hope this work inspires further research and development in the area with the main goal of building a safer and more productive social media landscape.
If you have any questions or comments, we've linked our emails here as well as Vector AI engineering team's email. We'll also drop our emails down in the Zoom chat. So thank you so much for listening.